Good morning, everyone. We are going to be doing part 2 of our 1950s beginner's dress sew along today. So last week we made the bodice from 2 very simple bodice pieces from the 1950s sisters dress pattern. And then this week we are making the skirt. So you'll remember we cut out 2 rectangles that were 45 inches wide by 32 inches long. And if you're one of the smaller pattern sizes, so pattern size 12 and under, that equals off the rack size 6 and below, I might narrow that skirt just a little bit down to about 43 or 44 inches, and that will ensure that you do not have too much bulk in the waist area. That being said, part of the reason why 1950s dresses are so flattering is because they have a very fitted bodice, and then the skirt flares out, and it gives the illusion of having this perfect tiny waistline. Today, we're going to sew the skirt and attach it into the waistline. Next time, we are going to insert the zipper and hem the dress, and it's going to be ready to wear. So as always, please feel free to leave your comments down below. I'm very proud of you guys. I know some of you are a little bit newer to sewing, but believe me, when you finish this dress and you try it on, you are going to feel so beautiful and so happy. It's the feeling I got when I made my very first 1950s dress. Oh goodness, 15 years ago now, and I have not stopped making them since. See, this is another one, different pattern. But yeah. So without further ado, let's start sewing, and I will see you over at the machine. So we're starting off the skirt side seams by putting together 2 of those 32-inch wide pieces of fabric and then pinning along the 32-inch length. So you see I have this one already pinned. This is going to be the side seam. And then we're just going to stitch that using a standard 5/8 inch seam allowance. This part of the sewing project for me often becomes kind of therapeutic because you're just sewing a very long, straight seam, and you can kind of enjoy this kind of sewing more than the smaller parts where you're going around curves. Then we're going to backstitch when we get to the end of the seam here and trim those extra threads. Now, for the other side, instead of pinning the entire 32-inch length, we are going to pin up, but leave the top 8 inches unpinned. The reason for this, you can see on the left, the pin stop there, is because this is going to be the center back opening, so how you get into your dress, in other words, and we need to have room for the zipper to go in. So that is why we're not stitching the entire 32 inches on the second side seam. So I have a pin there that shows where to start and stop. That pin is sideways. And we're just going to backstitch and go all the way to the end and backstitch again. And if you are new to this video, you should definitely go check out the first video, which I published a couple weeks ago. It gives a lot more details about what kind of fabric in the description, what kind of lining, etc. So here we have our finished seams and we want to press them. I really like using the 5-step pressing method. This means pressing it flat, pressing it open from the wrong side, pressing it open from the right side, pressing the seam allowances to one side from the wrong side of the garment, and then keeping them that way I'm pressing from the right side again. Now, I know that sounds very complicated, so I will link to a list of how to do this on my blog. I have an article for you guys. If you did not watch the video from last time, I just want to reiterate, it is so important to press your seams as you go. This is not about ironing or getting the wrinkles out. This is about melding the seams together, so melding all the threads from the spool of thread and then from the fabric pieces together. And it helps it to look much nicer, but it also helps it to last longer. So now this is the final step there. Now here we are on the edge that is going to have the zipper in it. So I'm not going to do the 5-step pressing method with this one. I'm pressing it flat, then I'm pressing it open as you see here. And the top edge that's going to have the zipper in it, the part that's not stitched, that needs to be pressed open 5/8 of an inch as well. So that's what you're seeing that little flap folded back is. Okay, so I thought I had shown this on camera, but apparently I did not get good footage. I have zigzagged the entire upper edge and also the side seam allowances. If you have an overlock stitch on your machine, that's even better, but a zigzag is perfectly fine as well. This is just going to prevent our fabric from fraying as it gets washed and worn over the years. Yeah, and you can see that other side seam is pressed as well and finished with a zigzag. Okay, so now we are going to do the exact same thing with our lining skirt. At this point in time, the lining and the fashion fabric are being assembled in 2 separate pieces. By the way, I love to watch vintage movies when I'm sewing. This one that you see here is called The Royal Wedding. I think it's 1951. And it is with Fred Astaire and Jane Powell, and it is an adorable little movie. I will link it below. It is on Amazon. You can rent it or purchase it, and oh my goodness, I just love this one. Okay, so we're finishing up that 5/8 inch seam allowance on the lining fabric. Backstitch and trim the threads. Okay, and you can see that we are measuring down 8 inches on this other one, just as we did with the fashion fabric. So we're just assembling the skirt lining the exact same way we assembled the skirt made from the fashion fabric. I'm pressing that seam flat, and then I'm pressing it open. And again, this is the one that has the 8 inches open for the zipper, so we will not use the 5-step pressing method on this one. We are just going to turn under that 5/8 inch for easy installation when it comes to the zipper next time. Okay, so I did manage to film finishing the raw edges on this skirt. You can just see we're doing a zigzag. It's just going right off the edge of the fabric, and that is encasing those raw edges. Okay, now this is the next day, and I'm watching still another vintage-esque show. This is Road to Avonlea. Okay, so I want to check in with you and explain what we're doing before we go to the next step. I will obviously show you on the machine, but it's a little easier to understand if I explain it to you zoomed out, quite literally. So this is our skirt. We have our fashion fabric skirt completed, and we have the lining completed as well. What we want to do is we're going to gather it, and it's going to fit into the bodice, and it's going to be very pretty. Now, how do we gather it up? So that is what we're going to talk about. we want to use a gathering stitch, which is a straight stitch on the machine, but it's the longest stitch possible. The second thing about gathering stitches is you're not going to backstitch at the beginning or the end of this row of stitching. So what we're going to do is you want to find where the top of the skirt is. So see, we have our seams on the edges. We have this one portion that has an opening, and that is where the zipper is going to go. This is going to be center back. This is going to be the portion which is attached to the open back edges of the bodice. You want to start at the end and stitch all the way across the entire circumference of the upper skirt edge. We're just going to keep sewing and sewing and sewing, and it's a little bit long, so it'll take a minute. When we get to the end, again, no back stitching. We're just going to pull it out of the machine. We're going to trim the threads, probably at about 5 inches or so. Then we're going to pull up the bobbin thread. We're just going to kind of start tugging on it and sliding the fabric across, and that is going to allow us to gather the fabric. So you want to do this on the fashion fabric, and then you also want to do this on the skirt lining. So at this point, the skirt and the skirt lining are still two separate pieces. Once they are both gathered on the top edge, we will pin one on top of the other, and then we will stitch them into the bodice. So that's what's coming up, and I'll see you back at the machine. So we have just set that machine stitch to the very longest setting, and again, I did not backstitch. I'm just going to sew from the start to the end. You kind of have to maneuver the fabric as you go along because the skirt is such a large piece that it just requires feeding the side of it kind of along your sewing desk as you're feeding the edge of it through the machine. Now again, I'm not backstitching. I'm just going to pull the threads out, and instead of clipping them close to the edge of the fabric, I'm clipping them several inches longer. Now you want to find the bobbin thread. I'm just using my scissors to separate the two threads that got kind of stuck after pulling them out of the machine. And the bobbin thread is the one that was on the underneath. You pull on it and slide the fabric along the thread as you do, which causes it to gather up for sort of a ruffly effect. And now I'm doing that from the other edge as well, because you can gather from either end where you did not backstitch. I like to kind of meet in the middle, so I start on the right and go towards one center seam, and then I start on the left and go towards the center seam the other way. That just puts less strain on the threads of the gathering stitches if you don't rely on the same side the entire time. Okay, so we now have our two skirts completed. You can see we have the lining gathered up and the fashion fabric as well. So what we're going to do is put the lining skirt inside the fashion fabric skirt. And the seam allowances are on the inside of the garment. That's how you can tell right side versus wrong side. So we want to flip the lining inside out. And then we want the seam allowances to be sort of against each other in the skirt. So the seam allowances of the fashion skirt and the seam allowances of the lining skirt will be kind of sandwiched up together. And then we're going to line up the edges of the back opening. So we're going to match up the side seams at the center front, and back openings, and that is how we know how to sort of orient it when we get it inside the fashion skirt. So this is going to take a minute because there's quite a bit of fabric at this point. You can kind of shake it out to get it into place. So we want to take our pins and start lining up the points that we know are definites. So we're going to match up those edges. And then we're going to match up the edges on the other side and pin it in place. Now the next thing that we can match up is the center front seam. So there are those seam allowances. You see the two seam allowances of the two separate skirts are sandwiched right up next to each other. Pin that in place, and now we have our three main points pinned up, and we're just going to pin everything else together until it is approximately the same size. Now keep in mind, this is not going to be the final size of the skirt. We will know exactly how small to make it when we are pinning it into the lower edge of the bodice. For right now, we just want to make sure that the two skirts are gathered equally, and we're pinning them to be essentially one piece. And I am wearing my favorite fingernail polish today in this video, which is called Fairy Tailor, which I think is kind of perfect. I will link it below. Okay, so we're going to take our bodice. This is the bodice we finished last week, and we're going to flip it because the bottom edge is obviously the one that's going to be attached to the skirt. This is going to be the waist seam. And we want to put right sides together. So we're going to match up the back opening edges, take the pin out of the skirts, and replace it pinning through all three layers. Then we're going to go over to the other side and repeat the same process. So back opening of the bodice, pin to the back opening of the skirt. So next, let's find the center front of the bodice. So I am folding it in half, matching up those darts. You could also do it by folding the side seams together, but obviously it's going to find the same center front either way. Once you have that fold noted with your finger, place a pin, and then we can take that pin right there and match it up to the center front seam of the skirts. So you can see those seam allowances. You may have to look carefully because if you did a good job pressing, it's going to be harder to find than it may otherwise be. Okay, so now that we have found center front of both, we're just going to pin them in place. So anything beyond the center front and the back openings, we're now just going to pin together. It's a very simple process. You just want to make sure you get through all those layers and you should be good to go. Okay, so this is completely pinned in, and just to help you remember where we are if you've never sewn a dress before, again, that little V right there, that's where the zipper is going to go. The area on the left and the right is the bodice, so the upper portion of your dress, and then this whole seam that we're going to stitch is called the waist seam. Now, at this point in time, you might have to adjust the tension on your sewing machine. Your sewing machine manual should show you how to do that because we are now stitching through a lot more fabric than normal. Just take it nice and easy and go one little bit at a time. Make sure that everything is being stitched through at the same time. Now, when I'm sewing a gathered skirt, sometimes I will lift up the bodice and make sure that nothing is bunched up, that I'm not creating any pleats that I don't want to be. And we just continue this process all the way till we get to the end. And then definitely backstitch. So now that everything is in one piece, we want to steam this really well. And because there are so many gathers in the skirt, I do not want to flatten them completely. So using the iron, I'm actually initially just going to use my steam button and steam up above the fabric a little bit first before I flatten it. That just means it gets the same steam benefits, but not as much time with the pressure of the iron. And I will link to my pink Singer iron. I had a Singer steam iron that lasted me about 6 years. It finally went in the way of all flesh, so I had to get another one. And it comes in several different colors, but I think everything's better when it's pink. Okay, so we have done so much progress today. Next time we're going to do the zipper and finish the hem, and then you'll be ready to wear it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.